Hi, class. My name is Karen Rose, and I will be your English professor this summer for English 2, right? The Introduction to Literature class. So, since our class is totally online, right? It's an asynchronous class. I thought it would be nice to make this video just to sort of introduce myself to you, say a little bit about our class, right? And what you can expect from the class, what you can expect from me, and also what I expect from you. Okay, so a little bit about me, right? I have been teaching full time at Long Beach City College since 2002. Okay, prior to that, right, I went to UCLA, and that is where I got my bachelor's, master's, and PhD, right, all in English, right? I was extremely lucky that I got hired, pretty much right away at Long Beach City College. And since I've been at LBCC, right, I've been teaching English 2. Really, I think every semester since I got hired, it's actually my favorite class to teach. However, right, I've only taught it fully online. This is my third time. Okay. So anyway, I am going to now say a little bit about our class, right? So English 2 is the introduction to literature class. So we are going to be, reading and exploring the primary genres of literature, right? So short stories, poetry, right? Drama, as well as the novel, right? So that's the goal of our class. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and share the syllabus and just do a quick overview, right? I did already send the syllabus to you, so hopefully, you did have a chance to read it. And then I'm going to open up the class Canvas page and just kind of show you, right, how to access the readings, right? As I had mentioned in my email, you do not have to purchase any books, right? You don't have to buy anything for this class. So I'll show you, right, how to access those, as well as kind of give you an overview of what, right, our weekly assignments will consist of. Okay, so that's the goal for this video. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that I can pull up the syllabus. Okay, so hopefully, right, you're looking at that syllabus right now on the screen. Now, you might have noticed from the schedule of classes, right, that I'm actually teaching 2 sections of English 2 this summer. So there's 50375 and then 50374, right? So they're both identical, right? So I just happen to have pulled up on the screen the syllabus for 50375, right? If you're enrolled in the other section, don't worry, right? It's the same content. Okay. So anyway, our class, right, starts on June 16th, goes up through July 24th. So it's a 6-week class, right? I typically, teach this class in 16 weeks on campus. So this is a little bit different for me. And it was, I will say, a challenge, right, to squeeze, as much of the material as I could into this, the 6-week format. So I do not have regular office hours on campus because this is the summer, it's an online class, right? However, I am available to meet with you via Zoom, right? You can also please, right, anytime you have any questions or any concerns, right, go ahead and send me an email. Right. I really, it seems like I'm always in front of my computer, right? And so I really do my very best to get back to you as quickly as I can. So I'm not going to read through the whole syllabus right now. I'm just going to kind of skip ahead here to the grading, right? Just so I can say a little bit about the requirements for this class. So there's 2 essays, right? Essay 1 is 3 to 5 pages. Essay 2, 4 to 6 pages, right? There is 1 exam at the end of the semester, right? The final. It is a multiple choice test with 3 short answer questions. Okay. There are also reading quizzes, right? I do drop the lowest score, right? I'll be actually showing you a reading quiz in just a minute in this video. And then, it is an online class. So really, right, the primary way that we will be communicating as a class is via the discussion boards, right? And so each discussion board is worth 10 points. right? And you can see, right, I do have an overview of how, how do I give you your grade? How do I figure out these 10 points, right? So you can see that little box right there, right? That the quality of your post, right? That's 7 points. You do have to meet a minimum of 250 words for each discussion board, right? So if you do meet that requirement, you get 2 points for that, as well as responding to a classmate, right? That is worth 1 point. Right, there is, a deduction for late work, right? If you post anything late, right? It could be a quiz, an essay, a discussion board, right? I do accept late work. However, there is a penalty, right? So Canvas will automatically deduct 10% for every day that you post late. So the content warning, right? And I did also, email you about this, just, giving you some heads up, right? That, some of the literature that we are reading this semester, right? It does touch on content, right? Topics that to some people, it might be disturbing. Right. Again, we're reading literature that is about life, right? And if we think about life, life is filled with all kinds of things, right? Some things are positive and some things are negative. So we are going to be reading about some difficult subjects, right? Such as substance abuse, blackmail, infidelity, suicide, murder. Right. And so, right, topics like racism, sexism, classism, right? It could come up in this literature, as well as, right, there will be a few occasions where there is language that is very problematic, right? Very disturbing. Certainly we'll never say those kinds of words in our discussions, right? But, I'm just giving you a heads up that when you're reading, you might, find language that is problematic to you. And so if that's the case, right, if you have a problem with any of these topics, unfortunately, I do recommend that you drop the class. Okay. So lecture videos, right? Sort of like this video I'm recording right now. I actually do record a video for every reading assignment, right? Now, again, I can't make you watch the videos. I hope you will, right? I will post them. It is really your responsibility to watch these videos, right? Because, right, I'm going to be talking about the literature, talking about the writer. And so the things that I'm going to be covering in these videos will definitely help you succeed in the class. And then just briefly, essay format, right? So again, these two essays that you'll be writing, right? In English classes, we do require that you format your essay with what we call MLA style, right? And that stands for Modern Language Association, right? If you took English 1 at LBCC, you probably, learned about this. Maybe you didn't take English 1 at LBCC, you don't remember what, MLA is, right? Feel free to ask me, right? I'm happy to, again, schedule a Zoom with you, right? I also have posted a link to, right, the Purdue Online Writing Lab, which is really, I think, the best free resource for MLA, formatting. And it's pretty easy, really, really. Basically, MLA is just referring to 1-inch margins, right? That your essay has a header and with a page number and your last name. Now, English 2 is a little bit different than English 1 and English 3 in that, right? English 1 and English 3 at the college, those are composition classes, right? English 2 is actually a literature class. So you'll see that for your essays, right, for English 2, I do not require you to do any outside research. Right. I'm really more interested in what you have to say about the literature, right? So you don't have to have a works cited page or anything like that. Okay. And again, we'll talk more about that when we get closer to the essays. So academic honesty, plagiarism, and the use of AI, those, three topics really kind of all go together. So, I'm sure you're all familiar with these topics too, right? But basically, it's so easy to cheat, right? Especially in an online class, right? But I urge you not to use AI for your essays or your discussion boards. Why? Well, because number one, it's defeating the purpose of you taking the class, which is really to broaden your horizons, learn about literature, right? Share your thoughts and your insights about literature. If you're just using AI to, write your discussion board posts or your essays, you're really, hurting yourself, right? I mean, honestly, this class, in my opinion, is kind of a once in a lifetime opportunity in that you get to read all this wonderful literature, right? I've really tried to select stories and poems, in a play and a novel that will capture your imagination and that you'll really, find is really interesting and you want to talk about. Right. So, please don't jip yourself and not read the literature and respond to the questions, right? I'm really hoping that you're going to get, engaged in the literature and want to write about it and share your thoughts. I do actually, for your essays, use Turnitin. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Turnitin, right? It is like a program that we run essays through, and it does show, if you used AI, if you copied from web sources. So, just letting you know. Um, and then also, right, I, want to encourage you, right, to use the Writing and Reading Success Center. It is a resource on campus, right? There is also an online, component. You can, get tutoring online as well. If you are on campus, right, it is in the new M building, right? It's a beautiful facility, right? You could go there. They have computers and printers and, all kinds of stuff there. And I've put down their hours, right? And I also have a link on Canvas, right? So the rest of the syllabus, I really just gave you a table, right, where I sort of broke down by week, right, all of the reading assignments. So you can see, right, that for the first 3 weeks, right, it kind of like the most stuff is going on in the first 3 weeks because the first 3 weeks is where we'll be covering short stories and poetry. Okay. Now I really like it was very difficult for me to whittle down, right? 16 weeks of reading into 6 weeks, right? So I had to cut a lot of my favorites, but I have like made it so that for the first uh, uh, 3 weeks, like I said, we'll be reading like say between 3 to 4 short stories and then 2 to 3 poems per week. Okay. So I think it's pretty manageable. And then when we get to the end of week 3, that's kind of the halfway point, right? That will be when your essay is due, right? Your first essay, right? So July 6th, it is due on a Sunday. And then after that, we'll be only reading 2 more works, right? The play, Death of a Salesman by Arthur Miller, right here, as well as the one novel that I chose for our class, which is Passing by Nella Larson. And I'll say a little bit more about that in a minute, right? And then kind of scrolling down to the bottom of the syllabus, right? You can see that the essay, right? Essay number 2 is due the very last day of the summer session, which is July 24th. And then the exam, right? Again, the multiple choice exam that is on Canvas, you'll have to also complete before Thursday, July 24th. Okay. So I know it's kind of strange that the summer session ends on a Thursday and not a Friday. I'm not exactly sure why, but that's the case. Okay. Now I will also be posting announcements right on our Canvas page. Typically, I post 2 announcements a week. Okay, so I will post one on Monday morning, right? Which will be sort of like, welcome to the week, right? Welcome to week 1, welcome to week 2. And in that email announcement, right, I will give you an overview, right, of what we'll be focusing on for that week. So I'll, list out what you need to read. I'll list out the reading quizzes you need to complete, as well as the discussion boards. And then on Friday, right, the end of the week, I will always also post an announcement where I say, hey, reminder of due dates, right? Because you'll see, right, that it's pretty consistent throughout the summer session that the discussion boards are due, your post is due on Friday, right? Your response to a classmate will be due on Sunday. And then the multiple choice reading quizzes that you will take are always also due on Sunday. Okay, so I'll kind of send that Friday reminder. I do encourage you in the settings in Canvas just to make sure that when I post an announcement, that you get some kind of a notification, whether it be an email, or however you choose to be notified. Just that way you won't, accidentally miss it. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen one more time so that I can show you the Canvas page, right? So here it is. And now I'm logged on as the teacher, so it, maybe looks a little bit different when you look at it on your end, although I don't think that much. And so you can see, right, the home page, right, just basic information, a video, right, the welcome video, as well as a link to the syllabus you can find there. Announcements, right, shoot, I haven't posted any announcements yet, so there's nothing there yet. Now, really, most of the time when I am logged into Canvas, what I'm really looking at is modules, right? Because I have pretty much all of our, all of the class information, right, in the modules. Okay, so I'm in modules right now, right? You can see course information where I have the video, the syllabus, right, as well as the very first discussion board, which is meet the members of our class. Okay, so this is a discussion board where, I'm really hoping everybody's going to write an introduction, right? Just so we can kind of get to know each other, right? Because this is an online class. We're not, in the classroom. So, please post your introduction, right? I already posted mine. And I would like it if possible, if you post a photo, just so I know, who you are. And, if you don't want to share a photo of yourself, you could even post a picture of your pet or, anything. And that is worth 5 points. Okay, so going back to modules, right? I also have a discussion board where you could post a question, right? Sort of like a frequently asked questions section, right? So if you, ever have a question you want to ask me, or maybe like something you're concerned about, maybe you can't find something on our Canvas page, of course you can send me an email, that's fine. But maybe you want to post it on the discussion board, right? Maybe other people in the class might have a similar question, right? So I'm just giving you another option, right? Another place where you could post any questions that you have. I go back to modules, right? So then the first module is called English 2 Resources. And this is a place where I post sort of like handouts, right? Again, I'm not asking you to purchase a textbook. So this is material that you might find in a textbook, right? You can see, right, literary terms, right? And so these are, handouts or PowerPoints. This is the link that I mentioned to the Purdue Online Writing Lab. If you, like information about MLA, right? The next module is called Essay Assignments, right? So again, there's 2 essays for this class, right? I'll just click on the assignment for essay number 1, right? So we'll talk more about it later. I'm just giving a brief overview here, right? So I give you the topic, right? Again, the guidelines, 3 to 5 pages. And I also have given you some sample essays, right? Often at the end of every semester, I'll ask my students that wrote really good papers if I can use their paper as a sample, right? And if they say yes, then I'm sharing it with you just so you can see kind of like what I'm looking for. And then most important, perhaps, is I do give you, right, the rubric, right? So I use a rubric to grade your papers, and you can see these are the different criteria that I'll be assessing, when I look at your paper, and you can actually see how many points, right, each criteria is worth. And so, it's probably a good idea when you're working on your essay to kind of look at that rubric just to make sure that you're, meeting the criteria that I'll be looking for. Okay, so again, these essays, right? If, when we get to the essays, I do encourage you to send any questions that you have, drafts you'd like me to look at, right? I'm happy to set up a Zoom with you at any time. And then exams, right? Again, there's one, right, exam at the end of the semester worth 100 points, right? And I've given you here, some information about that exam, right? Again, it will be multiple choice, right? There's 52 multiple choice, multiple answer matching questions, as well as 3 short answer questions that are 200-word minimum, right? And I will have that exam posted July 22nd, and you have until July 24th to complete it. Okay. All right, so I kind of gave an overview of that. Going back to modules. Okay, so this is really what I wanted to show you. So you can see, right, I've organized our class by week. Okay, 6 weeks. And so when you look at the module for each week, right, you'll see that I have the readings. Okay, so for week 1, right, we're reading 4 short stories and 2 poems. So you can see those links. Okay, now again, you're not buying any books, right? You can read this stuff for free. And so I want to show you how these, different kinds of links work. So the very first reading assignment, Arthur Conan Doyle, A Scandal in Bohemia. I started with the oldest work of literature, right? As well as of all the short stories that we're reading, it's the longest. Okay, so really the 3 longest stories I put in week 1, thinking, okay, it's the beginning of the summer session. This is probably, you have less work right now, right? As the summer session goes on, things maybe pile up, especially if you're taking, multiple classes. So I started with the oldest and the longest, right? This is Arthur Conan Doyle. You can see it was published a long time ago, 1891. Okay. Right. So in case you don't know, Arthur Conan Doyle, right, he is the writer who created the character Sherlock Holmes. Okay. So, right, you'll see link to PDF, right? So whenever you see that, you just click on that, and then you'll see, right, that there's a PDF provided of the story. Okay, so you don't have to print it, you can read it however you want, right? This one story, as I mentioned in my note there, it's divided up into chapters, which is a little unusual for a short story. The reason, though, is kind of interesting is because when Arthur Conan Doyle, right, published this story, it was published in a magazine, right? It was published in a weekly periodical, right? So, like, it would kind of like you would have to wait. You would read it, and then you'd have to wait, right, for the next episode, issue to come out. So then you would so chapter 1 was maybe published in March, say, and then chapter 2 is published in April, right? So that's why it's divided up into three chapters. It's only 10 pages, so it's not that long, right? So you sometimes you'll see for the reading it says link to PDF, right? Now the Sherman Alexie is an example, right, of a more contemporary story. Right, it was published in 2003, so not that long ago. Well, I guess it was a while ago now that I think about it, but it doesn't seem like that long ago to me, maybe. And you can see, right, that I give you options, right? It was published in the magazine The New Yorker. You can click there and actually go to The New Yorker and read it there, right? I also have a PDF that I'm sharing with you, as well as an audio recording, right? I know that some students like to, listen to an audio version, right? And I'm fine with that. That's great. I don't mind, right? If you just listen to the story as opposed to reading it, that's fine. Now some of the audio recordings I have, I'll just share this with you. They were actually recorded by my daughter, right? I have 2 daughters, right? And one of my daughters is actually an adjunct professor in the music department at Long Beach City College. And she has a beautiful voice, right? She's a professor of voice, and she does a lot of audio recording. So I asked her, I was like, oh, will you read, some of my stories and make an audio recording so I can, give that to my students. So some of them you'll see, right? And you can just click on the audio recording. You can play it from here, right? Or, you can download it and play it on your phone, or, however you want to do that. But that's an option. And then I think there's one other type of reading I wanted to just show you, right? So you can see for the Franz Kafka story, A Hunger Artist, right? When you click on that, you can see that little link icon. It looks a little bit different, right, than the paper icon. So this story, actually, you're going to be reading it from a website. And so whenever you click on a link and you see this, in the screen, and you might be like, you are trying to launch content, insecure content, you might be thinking, what the heck, right? Don't worry, I'm not going to send you to some like bad website or anything, right? But if you click on this right here, you'll see where the title of the story is. That's a link, right? And if you click on it, right, you'll see it brings us to this website, right? So there's like a Franz Kafka online website. It's a very cool website, right? It has all of Franz Kafka's works. You can read them all for free, right? And I'm asking you just to read this one story. Okay, so basically to access the readings, you'll either be reading a PDF that I've uploaded, right? Or linking to a website. Now, sometimes websites, they go down or, something might happen. If you ever encounter, a reading assignment where the link doesn't work, or maybe the PDF doesn't load, or who knows what, please immediately send me an email so that I can fix it, right? Because if you're having a problem accessing the reading, maybe somebody else in the class is also having that problem, and I want to know so that I can fix it. Okay, so again, links to readings, stories, poems. Okay, then as I said, right, I've actually recorded a video for every single one of our reading assignments. Okay, so I'll just click on the first one, the Arthur Conan Doyle. Right, so if you click there, there I am, right? You'll see that, again, this video that I recorded. Okay, so I did, upload these videos to YouTube just because YouTube is a little bit easier to like navigate videos than Canvas is, I think. So the videos are there. And again, like I said, they're going to be helpful, I hope, right? I'm giving you a lot of information that I really think is going to be useful. So I do really encourage you, right, to watch these videos, right? I spent a lot of time recording these, and I really try my best here to give you the same experience that you would get if you were taking the class on campus. Okay, so all the videos, right, and then the discussions. Okay, so again, this is an online class. The only way we are really discussing the literature is via this discussion board. So, right, I really tried so hard to, make it pretty consistent in that, right? So for the first 3 weeks, right, you can anticipate that there will be 3 discussion boards per week. Okay, so, and then for the last 2 weeks, right, there will be 2 discussion boards for those last 2 weeks. Okay, so, right, I'll just click on the first one, right, Doyle, Randall. You can see the due date, June 20th, and then the points that it's worth. Okay, so for this first, discussion board, right, you can see they're combined, right, 2 readings. So, right, I put these 2 readings together, even though they're, so different and they're published, almost 100 years apart. But the thing that's really interesting is both the Dudley Randall poem, right, and Arthur Conan Doyle's story, right, they both, right, hinge on something unexpected happening at the end, right? So they're the kind of like work of literature. When you read it, when you get to the end, you're like, oh my God, right, I can't believe this. And so, right, I'm asking you, right, to choose. I always give you a choice, right, to choose either the story or the poem and then write a response, right? And all the discussion boards is a minimum of 250 words, right, that addresses the following question. Okay, so here, right, the question is, what motivates the characters? Were you surprised by the ending? Why or why not? Okay, did you enjoy the story or poem? Why or why not? Okay, so you're writing 250 words that addresses those questions. You're posting it on the discussion board, right? Your response to the question will always be due 11:59 p.m. on Friday, right? And then your feedback to one classmate, right? You need to post no later than 11:59 p.m. on Sunday. Okay, and that's how the discussion boards will go. Okay, so every week, right? Again, like I said, I always will give you a choice. Oh, shoot, clicked on the wrong thing here. I will always give you a choice, right? So you can see Alexi Dobbins discussion, right? Again, I'm asking here, I'm actually giving you 2 different questions. Okay, so And again, all the discussion boards, minimum 250 words. Now, 250 words, in my opinion, is really not that much. It's, if you were to type it out on a Word doc, double spaced, it's not even a full page, right? So it's just like not a very, very long, writing assignment. Um, okay, so those are the discussion boards. And then there are reading quizzes. Okay, so multiple choice reading quizzes, right? And I'm going to go ahead and just like give you like, so because I know sometimes people have anxiety when they think about, oh, a quiz, oh, right? So I want to show you, what to expect. So I'm going to go ahead and open up this first reading quiz. So anybody who's actually watching this video, maybe is going to get the first question right because they're going to see what it looks like, right? So you can see, I'll give you a little overview, right? This quiz covers Arthur Conan Doyle's Scandal in Bohemia and Dudley Randall's Ballad of Birmingham, right? It consists of 10 multiple choice questions and you have 10 minutes to complete it. Okay, so let's just say you're like, okay, I'm going to take this quiz, right? And again, I'm logged on as the teacher right now, so it maybe looks a little bit different, but this is what the questions look like. Right. So question one, right? They're really focused on the plot. I'm not going to ask you any like trick questions that would be really difficult, right? I want you to succeed. I want you to do great on these quizzes, right? So you can see this is what the questions are like, right? So question one, why does the King of Bohemia come to see Sherlock Holmes? Okay. Right. Now you can say, like, if you read the story, right, you'll know, like, oh, right, that the correct answer is the king wants to hire Sherlock Holmes to recover a photograph. So you would click on, right, right there. There you go. And that's question one. So this really does give an overview of what these questions are like. I'll even show you the second one. What words best describe Sherlock Holmes? Right, depressed and aimless, emotional and desperate, irrational and careless, rational and observant. Okay, well, he's this rational, observant detective, right? That's what the whole story is focusing on. So that would be the answer. Okay, so this is what the quiz questions are like. Okay, now I feel like, right, the quizzes are really a good way to kind of boost your grade in the class. Same thing with the discussion boards, right? It's, 10 points, 10 points. If you do the quiz and you do the discussion board, you're going to be getting, 30 points a week for the discussion boards, 30 to 40 points a week for the quizzes. So really, like, do not skip these. These are, I think, pretty easy assignments, right? They also really, one of the reasons why I gave these assignments is they force you to keep up with the reading. Okay, so these are the reading quizzes. So again, each week, the readings, short stories and poetry for the first 3 weeks, right? My videos, the discussion board questions, the reading quizzes. Okay, so you can kind of just see every week. Now, I've given you all the content for the class from day one. Okay, so sometimes I have students who work ahead, right? They want to get a head start. Um, do you need to do that? No, you don't, right? It's not even really encouraged, right? I think it's best to just kind of go week by week, right? But I give you all the content just so you can look ahead and know what to expect. I know when I was a student, right, I always appreciated when I kind of knew what to expect in the class. And so I'm, trying to give that to you. Okay. Now, just one last thing. So the two longer works that we're covering, right? The one play, which is Arthur Miller's play, Death of a Salesman, right? I have given you a free PDF copy of the play. Okay, so you can access that. And the same thing with the novel, right? The novel that we're reading is called Passing by Nella Larson. And it's a short novel. It's like 150, actually under that. It's 141 pages. Now you might be like 141 pages, but for as far as novels go, that is very short, right? And you can see, even I'm holding the paper book in my hand, it's like the pages are kind of small as well. So I feel like it is like a novel that, again, we have 2 weeks to read the novel. So I do feel like it's definitely something that we could do. You could really read the novel in one day if you just really sat down and read it. Now, both of these works, there are film versions, right? So there's like two film versions that I know of Death of a Salesman, and I know there's one film version of Passing. And maybe you might want to watch the film versions after you read, right? Right. So, that is fine if you want to go ahead and watch the film version, but definitely read the work, especially the novel, right? If you only watch the film version of the novel, right, they change things, right? So they change things, they've cut things, right, that aren't in the novel. So, the play, I will say the film version of the play is pretty much right word for word. So that could be very helpful. Also, like the novel, again, I've given you a free PDF, right? Somebody actually has scanned the entire book, right? It is in the public domain, so they didn't break any laws there. But, right, and that's great. You're welcome to just read the free PDF, no problem, right? I do know that sometimes people like to have like a paper copy of a book. Yeah, I do. You can see all my books, right? I'm old school. I like holding it in my hand, reading it that way. And if you do also want to actually have like a paper copy of the novel, I can give you a link right to Amazon where you can purchase it for $10. So, not that expensive. You could also even probably go to any library and, find a copy. It is a pretty popular novel, right? Especially, as I mentioned, it was made into a film, and the film came out really not that long ago, like maybe 5 years ago. And it was a film that was actually made for Netflix. So if you have Netflix, right, that's where you would find it. Again, do not watch the film until you read the book, right? Okay. Well, I think that's all I wanted to cover in this introductory video. So I hope that now you have a little bit more of an idea of like what to expect from the class. I hope you're excited, right, to take this class. It is, in my opinion, a fun class, right? And I know this is a class that many students take that are English majors, right? And, yay, English majors, right? Now, if you are, thinking about being an English major, yay, right? Awesome. I would say that you might think about like taking this class on campus because again, this 6 week online English 2 class does not, really cover everything that we do in the 16-week on campus class. Right. So, just keep that in mind. I am actually teaching the on-campus 16-week English 2 in the fall, right? So if you're kind of thinking, God, maybe I should take it on campus, right? That class is a Tuesday, Thursday class. So, you can reach out to me with any questions about it. Okay. Well, anyway, thanks for watching the video. If you're still here, right? Thank you. I look forward to working with you this summer, right? I'm very excited to read your feedback, your comments on the literature on the discussion board, right? I actually do read everything that you write, right? In case you're wondering, I do. And I always love to know, right, what my students think of the reading assignments. Okay, that is it. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions or problems. Again, I look forward to working with you this summer. Okay, bye-bye.